But all that being said is I think they're going to be okay. I think we have talent in some areas. Like you said, Johnny Wilson. In my opinion, I know people got upset about it, but he's not slow, but he's not a burner. He's a big body. If you move him to the Y, yeah, that's very tight endish. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but it looks very tight endish.
James,
I think he's going to be that good guy for contested grabs.
Who would you compare him to if you had to compare him to somebody from kind of Florida State's past in the last couple of years? Like they've had big targets in the past, guys like
Auden Tate.
Tate. Yeah, Auden.
Tate, actually, and then way back when would be Carr. But the thing is, Carr was really defined as a red zone threat, in my opinion, right. Where Johnny's being utilized, which I wasn't really expecting as much everywhere. But right. I would probably say Auden right now.
I think Auden's a better because Auden was a wide receiver that wasn't the fastest. Greg could go. I'm not going to disrespect my guy Greg. Them long legs was moving. And maybe a better in shape version of Kelvin Benjamin. Like I'm not going to go there and say he's going to be 1,000+ wide receiver, but like he's really big, man. He's not a small man. He's large out there.
Yeah. No, he's been definitely impressive, and not only him. Now it's been Micah Pittman, the Micah Pittman show. And I think too maybe people don't need to give a hard time on Deucepan. This is a project player that Norvell is going to continue to develop, and Winston Wright. Obviously, we're just glad that he survived that crash. And a good thing we heard yesterday was Mike Norvell saying that he's in town, he's in Tallahassee, he's rehabbing, and he's in team meetings. So they're just happy to have him back. But looking at Johnny Wilson and Micah Pittman. Pittman has had a really good last couple of weeks of practices. And I think a lot of people, too, were thinking he was going to be a bigger threat special teams. But now, he's making some crazy, ridiculous grabs where his body shouldn't be making these kind of grabs. And he's going up and bringing them down. And so you're looking at those two wide receivers. And, after the spring, there will be some guys that end up transferring. That'll probably be the biggest discussion after the spring game. But going into the spring game, I think a lot of fans are going to be excited to see 14, Johnny Wilson. They're going to be excited to see Micah Pittman and what he can do out on the field because they are fun wide receivers to watch. And, some of these veterans, too, aren't, standing down. You're looking at Darian Williamson. You've got Portier, who's had a really, really good physical spring on his end. You've got Joshua Burrell. Of course, Malik McLean is probably Jordan Travis's favorite target. So these veterans aren't stepping down from him, but it's a really good sign to see these wide receivers coming in and having this chemistry so early on with the quarterbacks and mainly Jordan Travis. But I think it's gonna be apparent since this is offense versus defense. This isn't a defense that isn't getting split up into two teams, kind of like a regular Garnet and Gold game. You're going to see pretty early on how dominant this defensive line is, and I can't wait for it to show because not only are you having Robert Cooper, Fabian Lovett, but right now someone pissed off Jared Jackson because the last few practices he is getting in people's faces. He's making plays. He had 2 back-to-back sacks yesterday, 11-on-11 against first team. And then you've also got Malcolm Ray, which we know what you've got there. He can play. He started playing very well last year in the latter half of the season. And Joshua Farmer, who worked on his body big time, probably too strong for maybe how raw he is still, but a strong presence there. And Florida State, looking back at last season, was the top team in the ACC in run game defense. And I don't see that changing whatsoever after what we've seen so far this spring. But it's going to be apparent. It's going to be apparent right off the bat in this spring game, James, when we're watching it, that this defense is going to have an edge on the offense. And I don't think this should shock too much FSU fans to be like, oh, this offense is going to suck. It's brutal. There's a lot of highlights that have come from camp, but this has a potential. And if this doesn't get right for Fuller this year and what he's got right now, that defensive line, then we'll have another discussion because this has a really strong chance of being one of the top defenses in the ACC heading into 2022.
That's a hot take right there.
A lot of people
really?
Everybody's always got on Fuller, man. And I'm gonna tell you this: people have kids don't lie, children do not lie. Well, their eyes. My son has never smiled. The first time he ever smiled in the picture with Mike Norvell was when we went to this past practice that he went to. which was funny, and everybody commented. They're like, "Your son literally acts like he hates Mike Norvell," which he doesn't. He's never in awe. But his favorite coach has been Coach Fuller. Now, it has nothing to do with the X's and O's. He's 8. He really doesn't know anything about that. He just knows Coach Fuller gave him a slice of pizza at the youth camp, and that's his favorite coach. Nobody else gave him pizza. He's like, the coach that gave, where's the coach? Like Coach Fuller comes, he's like, that's the coach that gave me pizza, right? So, yeah, that's my favorite. But I always joke, and people bash the defense, but the defense literally held us in some precarious situations consistently, man. Like, I don't care what any of the analysts. I know this. We cussed Jeff Bowden out a lot when I played. I would have fought Jeff Bowden if he would have went for. If I was Mickey Andrews and he went for it on 4th down inside of our 40. Like everybody talks about the legend. Like it would have been fighting words. Like we put him in some bad spots, but I do think he doesn't have a tool as good as Jermaine Johnson. I think Verse has the ability in 2 years to possibly be that. But he does have more talent all around on the defense. The secondary is the only way I can describe it is young and dumb. Like they're good, but they got to come together and play collectively, especially at the safety position. The sky is the limit. They have potential to be whatever they want to be. They just got to come together. And I think you named Logan for the first time with true, like not saying all these guys are all ACC. But for the first time, you can name guys that if they get in the game, you don't expect to see that far of a drop off depth along the defensive line, especially in the interior. Farmer, that kid's got heavy ass hands, and he's really he's good. You talked about Jared Jackson, transfer from Louisville from 5'6". Shout out to my boy Grimes. He coached him up at Dwyer. He's a guy that. If you can mess around and get something out, like get his potential to show, you got a steal of a draft pick in a year or two. And that's the crazy part is that there are guys that have been on this roster that have finally got a chance to develop a little bit from what we see. And maybe we can see Mike Norvell, the developer, in year 3. And if we can see Mike Norvell, the developer, in year 3, like what he had in Memphis, when you're not getting the blue chip caliber prospects, but you're getting guys who are 3 stars and you're putting them in the scheme, you're developing them, and you're seeing them do stuff. Now it could get spooky, and it needs to get spooky because I will say this: what the rivals are using, which they have a much better hype machine, media, united media front, that's full of inclusion to all kinds of sources so that they have as many people talking about these staffs that have done absolutely nothing. They look like they're not going to miss a beat. Like Miami's roster has not changed much, and Florida's roster is really, really bad. But you see fans are hopeful because the beat is actually seeing some stuff. But I think and they're doing a good job in the media machine. But I think if Mike develops his talent and he's able to recruit properly, I think you can see Florida State finally take the edge on the Sisters of the Poor, which is what Big 3 is now.